Prison is a dictatorship. It's that simple. If the shot caller on the yard wants to have you hurt, you are going to be hurt. I had pushed my luck with Sam to the breaking point, and it was just a matter of time. The irony was that I was doing a lot better socially with pretty much all of the other Woods. It really felt like I was getting to know the other 30 or so white guys on the yard, and that they were getting to like me. If I could just not get in any more trouble and stay out of Sam's way, I could probably make it out of Badger section without getting stabbed. Of course, nothing is ever that easy. You see, CDC has a history of gladiator fighting. Being a correctional officer can be a boring job, and the most exciting thing is getting to watch inmates fight for some individuals. Whenever these individuals are bored, they have a history of accidentally opening cell doors and releasing members from rival gangs in order to see what happens. You see, at most prisons, the officer in the tower is able to just reach out and press a button and open a cell door, or 2 cell doors, or 10 cell doors, whichever ones he might want. As a result, it's very simple for him to accidentally press a couple of buttons and watch the ensuing chaos from the safety of the tower where he can't be hurt. As a result of this, there was a string of incidents where inmates who were in their cells resting were assaulted by members of rival gang members whenever the officer in the tower accidentally opened their door. The gangs, or at least the larger ones, came up with a policy in response to this. It's called one up, one down. What it means is that if you want to take a break, if you want to take your shoes off, maybe rest your eyes for 15 minutes, watch some TV, you can. That's allowed. Prison is not a place where you're expected to be just ready to go 100% of the time. But if you are going to rest, you have a responsibility to let your cellie know that you are taking your shoes off, that you are resting. So he can put his shoes on, he can be ready. If he has a piece, he knows where it is, and if that door pops, he can hold the door while you get up and help him. This policy of one up and one down is enforced to varying degrees at different prisons. If you go to some place that doesn't have a long history of gladiator fighting, where none of the inmates ever had a door accidentally opened on them, you're unlikely to even hear the term one up, one down. Some yards just don't do it as a thing. On the other hand, if you go to a serious yard that has a history of this type of real in-cell violence, Badger section at San Quentin, Salinas Valley, High Desert, Old Corcoran, it is a serious thing to keep one person ready to go at all times. This is relevant because that morning my sleep apnea was acting up. I felt poorly, and I told Tony, my cellie, hey, I'm going to close my eyes for 20 minutes. I'm ready to go to yard. Just let me know whenever they start popping doors and I'll get up. But I have a headache and I just need a couple of minutes. This is done regularly, and I didn't think that it would be a big deal. But as it turned out, I had grossly overestimated Tony's criminal sophistication and his understanding of the policies on a 4-yard. He'd had the mandatories explained to him, but he'd done a lot of his time on minimum security and level 1 yards, so he thought that the mandatories were just for show. Whenever I woke up to the sound of the cop walking past our door and not opening it because we were not ready for yard, meaning that we would not be participating in the mandatory yard, I was seriously worried. And he was very blasé. He expressed to me that he hadn't really felt like going out to yard, that he'd forgotten to wake me up. Whenever I explained to him that this was not a small thing, that I was probably going to get the crap beaten out of me over it, possibly killed, and that there was real good odds that he was going to get sucked up into the violence and maybe get hurt also, he started taking the situation really seriously, really quickly. The next time that the cell door popped was going to be at dinner. So he and I were ready. I had my boots tied, and I was aware of the fact that if retribution was coming, the door might be the bell, that as soon as I stepped out onto the tier, I could be engaged in violence. Tony really didn't want to have any problems. He had just wanted to kind of skate through Badger Section, and he was hoping that I could find a way to fix the problem for him, but I didn't have any pull. Nothing happened that evening at dinner. We went to dinner, we came back, no problems, and I started to hope that maybe nobody had noticed that we hadn't went out to yard. It seemed unlikely, but I was hopeful. After you lock up at dinner, there's a period of about 3 minutes where all of the inmates are entering their cells. This is a time period where you can run down and give a message to an acquaintance that lives a couple of cells down, or maybe take a soup to somebody that asked for one. The reason you have these 3 minutes is so that enough people can lock up into their cells and close the door behind them that the guard is able to physically walk down the tier and lock all of the doors without being concerned that there are so many inmates milling around in the small hallway. Filthy used this time to come fast walking out of his cell and hurry down to mine. I was standing in the doorway watching in case something like this happened, and I told Tony, hey, get to the back of the cell. All right, I'm going to try and handle this, but just try and stay out of the way. I made a mental note that if this could be done without violence, it would be the best thing, because I did not think that Sam was going to order me hard-checked over having missed a yard. It is true that a shot caller is a dictator. He can do what he wants. But there's oversight. He can be held accountable for his actions, and to hard-check somebody, to remove them, to kill them over missing a mandatory yard would be a disproportionate response, and he'd be risking the possibility that he could be checked as a result. More likely, Filthy was going to beat the donkey snot out of me. This may not sound that bad in the context of stabbing or murdering, but he had 50 pounds of muscle on me, and I had him listed as somebody that A, knew how to fight, and B, enjoyed violence. I really believed that if he got me on the ground, he would just keep kicking me until somebody got him off me, if somebody got him off me. I resolved that if he touched me or stepped foot into the cell, that I was going to have to consider that an initiation of violence and respond accordingly. But that if nothing like that happened, if he was just there to talk, I'd put up with whatever he had to say, and it's a good thing I did, because he tore me a new one. He expressed that there could have been a riot while I was sleeping in my bed resting, and that if he died, or if Shuck and Steve died, or Sam died, it would be on me, because I was saying that I cared more about my 20 minutes of sleep than I did about their lives. The horrible thing is, he was right. I really had intended to go out to yard that morning, because I was a member of a group. I had a responsibility. Of course, Tony hadn't informed me that it was time for yard, and I could throw him under the bus, but A, not my style, it's not the right thing to do. But B, it wouldn't matter. You're responsible for your own actions. There is no way that Sam or Filthy was going to accept my cellie didn't wake me up as the reason that I wasn't out for the mandatory yard. But there was only a little bit of time. The cop was walking down the tier, and Filthy was chewing me out, and he stopped, looked at the cop, and got real calm. He said, hey, don't worry, we'll talk about it later, and stormed off. I did not believe for a moment that we were going to just talk about it later, and I was worried. I was sure that the next morning at yard, Filthy was going to just take flight on me. I expressed to my cellie Tony that the best thing he could do the next day was keep some distance from me, that I was probably going to end up in a fight over the mandatories and get checked, but that if he wasn't around, they'd probably just give him a pass. He hadn't been there that long, and it would just be a warning, and it would be okay. Heck, them beating the snot out of me there on the concrete yard would serve as a pretty effective warning that he needed to get up the next time I guessed. I crawled up on my rack, I looked up at that ceiling, and I started going over my daily questions. What did I learn that day? What did I wish that I had learned the day before so that I could have known it that day? And what the hell was I going to do? I could roll up. I had the option of just closing that door and yelling until the cops came and got me out of there, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go serve the rest of my time with the sex offenders and the pedophiles. I could go out and take my licks. It was just going to be a beating, right? But the thing is that a beating, especially from a strong man, it can end badly. I saw a soft check end badly, actually. I saw somebody get knocked unconscious by a sucker punch and just crack his head open whenever he fell on the concrete. A soft check is a small thing, but it can be a very big thing, and I didn't know what to do. As I was going over my options, the officer walked up to the door. Channel? Went, yeah, that's me, I'm Channel. What's up? He told me, hey, 3 a.m., be ready. There's a bus coming and you're on it. You're out of here. That was it. I was gone. There was no more Sam or Filthy or soft checks. My heart dropped down into my feet. I couldn't believe it. I was getting out of San Quentin just one day before the hammer fell. And that is exactly what happened. The next morning, first thing in the morning, I was on a bus to High Desert. Sam, Filthy, Ty, I never saw these people again. I was at San Quentin for about a month. I'm going through my legal paperwork now, trying to figure out the exact dates. It was 18 years ago. I'm sure that I got a detail or two wrong, because I've forgotten over that period of time. I changed most of the names just to avoid incriminating anybody who would prefer not to be mentioned, but with these exceptions, this is exactly what happened to me. This was my first month in CDC, my introduction to how I was going to spend the next 16 years. To a real degree, San Quentin shaped who I was going to be for the rest of my incarceration, perhaps to some degree for the rest of my life. I made it through San Quentin, but I didn't make it through because I was smarter or stronger than the next guy. I got lucky. If that bus had arrived one day later, I would have been beaten up, stabbed, maybe killed. And it would have been entirely outside of my control. And that was the last lesson that San Quentin had to teach me. I was not in control. I was not in charge. Sometimes in life, we're confronted with situations that we just can't win. Life isn't fair. We say it so often it's a cliche, but it's very true. You will be confronted with insurmountable, impossible problems, situations where you will simply lose. This appeared to be one of those for me. And I remember after Mike got hit by Irish and I was concerned that I was next, I did everything I could to improve my odds of survival. I shadowboxed in the cell, I worked out twice a day, and just on a fluke, just in case, I wrote a letter to my counselor and wrote a letter to my family asking them to pressure him to get me out of San Quentin because it was dangerous there. As it turned out, that gamble paid off and I made it out of there just in the nick of time. But again, dumb luck. Still, I'd rather fight. I'd rather look for every single tactic available to me. The next time that you are confronted with a problem that you can't overcome, fight against it. You may lose, and that's the way that life works. It's not always fair. Sometimes it's dumb luck. But if I have to lose, I know that I would rather lose fighting. I'd rather fight to my very last breath instead of giving up. Wouldn't you?